Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every other Wednesday, Dan Wos. Of course, he's the author of the Good Gun, Bad Guy series of books and the host of the Loaded Mic radio program. Dan, thanks for coming along today, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Paul.
This is the first time we've been on the air together since we were down in Dallas, and I want to say you and Amanda did a great lead-off for AMCON. When we met for the Alternative Mass Media Conference, which is what AMCON stands for, you and Amanda Suffolk did a lead-off presentation on networking, and boy, you two just knocked it out of the park. As well, you came back and you spoke again later in the conference, and I believe you talked at GRPC as well, right?
Yeah. I came back at AMCON and I did a I did a little presentation on creating a thumbnail because we're talking about marketing and media people in the Second Amendment realm. So I talked about that, and then I came back for GRPC the next day, and I did another presentation. So yeah, I did a lot. But the thing with Amanda was fantastic because we had our basic concepts that we wanted to talk about, and it just kind of worked like magic. But Amanda and I have a pretty good rapport. We can read off each other pretty well. So the whole presentation I thought was a success. So either we got lucky or it was just it was meant to be. I don't know.
I don't know about lucky. I do know that there were a lot of, and Susan, my wife, gets all the comments from the conference, and we dig hard to try to get those to try and make AMCON better every year. And almost without exception, everybody loved that first segment, the networking one, and said that they would love to see that expanded. And so I think you guys definitely hit a home run with that. Yeah, I think it was awesome.
I think I've always had the idea that maybe we should have breakout groups and maybe we should expand on that aspect a little more so people can really get into the thought process of this stuff that we're working on. So maybe Amanda and I will do it again next year. We'll expand on it. But
yeah, sure. Well, we're here to talk about news today. So let's go ahead and get into that. First one I want to talk about is by one of my bosses. I'm going to get this story pulled up here. This, of course, by Dave Workman, and I'm going to read a little bit of his story. More than 3 months after the landmark Supreme Court ruling that struck down New York's unconstitutional and century-old gun permit good cause scheme, anti-gunners continue trying to get around the Second Amendment while the media seem content to help the whining. According to CNN, since the June 23rd smackdown of New York's carry permit law in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin case, scores of new lawsuits have been filed against gun restrictions at the federal, state, and local levels. The Cable News Network report also noted this shift in burden has put gun rights groups at a greater advantage in court. It has also changed the type of work that government defenders and outside the gun safety groups that often support them in litigation must do to advocate for their laws. Finishing up in the article is what I'm going to read. Dave writes, Monday, anti-gun New York State Attorney General Letitia James announced she will fight a federal court ruling from last week that declared some tenets of the state's new law, hastily adopted just days after the high court ruling, were unconstitutional. Speaking defiantly, James said her office had filed a motion to keep the entire Concealed Carry Improvement Act in effect and continue to protect her communities as the appeals process moves forward. This common sense gun control legislation is critical in our state's effort to reduce gun violence. We will continue to fight for the safety of everyday New Yorkers. Ms. James, if you were serious about that, you would issue firearms at the border like Texas does.
Not only that, they'd stop letting prisoners out of jail
yes.
in New York. Well, this whole New York thing has been a crazy ride, and I can take you through the kind of the timeline if you'd like, and I can also tell you where we're at the moment. You kind of touched on where we're at. They just appealed 2 days ago,
Right.
and but let me just kind of, if we have a minute, I can take you through the timeline. So we start off with, and I'm getting ready to do a big presentation here in my state on this exact topic at a conference. But anyway, so we start off with the very heavy gun restrictions in New York State. Primarily, two things. One was you have to show proper cause to get a concealed carry, and there's all sorts of restricted areas, and you can't carry in New York City and at all anywhere in the city. So what happened was New York State Rifle and Pistol versus Bruin case came along. Took 7 years. As the case started in 2015, eventually it knocked down the law. They got rid of all that stuff, so you can carry in New York at that point. Judge Clarence Thomas said that gun laws need to meet historical tradition, and there's no reason why people should have to show proper cause to be able to exercise their Second Amendment right. So we get to that point. We had a successful day, and it was only a day because after that, Hochul and her Democrat-dominant legislature decided that they had a whole other package of gun laws they're going to lay right over top of that Bruin case and defy the Supreme Court, and they did. And they implemented the Concealed Carry Improvement Act. They took the proper cause and they just renamed it to good moral character. So now you have to show good moral character if you're going to exercise your God-given right. And they also changed all the gun-free zones to sensitive locations, which the list was extensive. I mean, everywhere you go in New York was essentially a sensitive location, any place of gathering, basically.
Yeah, I read that entire list on the air once, and it took 7.5 minutes to read that list.
Yeah, it was horrible. And people can see that list if you go to goodgunbadguy.com/news. goodgunbadguy.com/news. That whole list is there. But anyway, so she lays this on top of the law, and we're going, what the hell is this? How could this be possible? We just had a Supreme Court decision. So Gun Owners of America goes in, and they tried to get an injunction, which means that law would be halted before it went into place on September 1st of this year. They didn't get the injunction because the judge said, although Hochul's new Concealed Carry Improvement Act was unconstitutional, the plaintiff didn't have proper standing. So GOA came back again with more plaintiffs, and and now by this point the law was already in effect, and FFLs, trainers, everybody's scrambling trying to make this thing work. GOA comes in and gets an injunction. And basically what that says is that the law is halted until they can actually defeat it in court, until the whole thing is heard in court. So that was a great thing. They got rid of a lot of the stuff. They got rid of the requirement to show 3 years of social media. They got rid of the requirement of the sensitive locations. What else did they get rid of? A whole bunch of stuff that was in that law that they. Go ahead.
If I remember right, they got rid of they cannot ban the entire subway system, and they cannot make all of Central Park a sensitive location.
In Times Square, right?
In Times Square, yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, but what Hochul had in that law was all private businesses are deemed gun-free unless the business owner posts a sign that says guns are welcome. So what she tried to do was make the decision for all private businesses that saying that their private business will be gun-free unless they otherwise post it. And most people wouldn't put a sign up that says guns are welcome. So of course she would get her way and basically deem everywhere, because she was mad. You got to
Yes.
understand, the Albany Democrat legislator was pissed off that they got defeated because they usually get their way, but the Supreme Court came in and said, no, we're not going to let you scoundrels do this. So she was mad. So she just went and they did this blanket law, which was totally unconstitutional. So anyway, Gun Owners of America comes in, they get the injunction last week, and they Letitia James had 3 days to file an appeal, and of course she did. So now they're in the appeals process. I don't think the state has a chance, tell you the truth, but you never know.
Yeah,
you
the
never
courts
know.
are courts. Yeah. I want to get some comments in because we've gotten a lot of comments. And by the way, if you want to get your comment in, if you're watching on the Polite Society podcast feed, either Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and comment there. I'll get your comments in, get your comments up. We'll talk about them on the air. If you're catching us anywhere else that picks us up, comment, go to Twitter and tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. Want to get George's comment up first. He says, isn't Letitia James busy enough trying to prosecute the Trump family? Well, that is kind of one of her focuses right now.
Yeah, she's had a vengeance for Trump, and she, even before she was appointed, she was talking about how that was her main mission, is to and you can see all sorts of videos of her talking to people and say, yeah, we're going to be a real problem for him, and I'm going to make sure that he knows my name and all this stuff. So I think Letitia James seems like just a very angry person who is somehow convinced that President Trump is just the worst guy on the planet. So anyway, so she's anti-Trump, she's anti-gun, she's pro-crime. They let criminals out of jail all the time here in New York State, and she's anti-gun. So they try to do everything they can to disarm the citizens. Just a horrible combination, and just horrible people. These Democrats in New York are just absolutely horrible people.
You mentioned earlier that they're mad. I very much equate Governor Hochul and Letitia James's actions post-Bruin to a 3-year-old throwing a temper tantrum. It feels that way to me. Well, you're going to make me do this. Well, then I'm going to do that and that and that and that. And you can't make me because that's the whole way it seems to me.
Yeah, it is. It is. They're kicking and screaming, really. And the problem we have is that they have the legislative power behind them because they're a Democrat-dominant legislature. They do whatever the hell they want. I can't understand how people still vote for them, but we have a lot of very stupid people living here in New York.
You said it, not me. Let me and there's a few very bright people that live in New York.
Let me add that too. There are a lot of very smart, conservative, traditional American people here in New York State, and the problem is we have to fight these lunatics constantly because they're doing everything they can to destroy our state. And I guess it would be similar to California. A lot of great people in California, but unfortunately you've got this majority of Democrats who have a really twisted way of thinking and want to live under some sort of socialist, regime. And real Americans don't like to live like that. But when in New York State, you have it's a dominant Democrat state. It's hard for logical thinking people to live a normal life.
Sure. Let me get some more. You just mentioned California. That leads right into our next question. George wants to know, when will freedom come to California? George, I'm going to say freedom's going to come to California just about the same time it comes to New York, and it's going to come the same way through lawsuits. The SAF specifically is very active in California, very active in Washington State, and a lot of Minnesota is one that comes to mind, but we're active all throughout the nation in federal lawsuits, bringing states into compliance with the Second Amendment. It's not going to be overnight. You're not going to be able to constitutional carry in New York or California tomorrow. I'm not going to lie to you, but I honestly believe that we are going to see that. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's gonna happen.
People have to be getting sick of, like in New York, even the Democrat voters have to be getting sick of the violence and the crime that's happening in New York State because of these Democrats. And in California, even the Democrats have to be getting sick of the homelessness and the filth living on the streets of, San Francisco and LA and Hollywood and all these areas. I would think even your far left Democrat would say, okay, enough is enough. But then again, I've been wrong in judging them. So
Yeah. Let me see here. And Mike over on the YouTube side, commenting on what you were saying here just about a couple minutes ago, saying that goes for throughout the country, is that people are, and I think he's referring to people are just getting tired of the liberals, the liberal way of ruling, and I hope that's true. I hope as the closer we get to this November's election, the more concerned I'm getting in that we should see polls going radically towards the red end of the spectrum, and we're seeing them move solidly, but not as solidly as I thought they would. I'm concerned for two things. I honestly think we're gonna get strong control of the House. I think we're going to get at least solid control. I think we're going to get a majority in the Senate, if not a strong majority. But I would rather see it go a lot more solid. The danger, Dan, and I've said this before on the air, the danger is going to be what happens between the middle of November and the middle of January, when there's that lame duck session in there, when there is a Democrat House and a split Senate. What are we going to get out of that when they know that Democrat control in the House goes away and Republican control of the Senate is coming? What happened? That's the last time that happened. We got Obamacare.
Yeah, and they're going to be more destructive. Like you said, that's the point where they're really going to be kicking and screaming like a bunch of 3-year-olds. But, I just did on my show, The Loaded Mic, which will be coming out. Actually, it's on Rumble right now. If you go to Loaded Mic on Rumble, you can see the episode. We just did a thing on the polls. And we did a little study of from Statista, I think it's called. This is a website. And we followed the polls. Now, out of 40 polls for the midterms, we saw 20 polls were positive Republican. And we're talking about Rasmussen. We're talking about some Fox polls, some left-wing polls, all sorts of polls. The majority of them tend to be left-wingy kind of polls, but the majority, 20 out of the 40, were positive for Republicans. Only 16 were positive for Democrats, and 4 were tied. So even the overall view of all the polls show Republicans ahead. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these polls are tilted toward the left. So I would imagine that the polls are actually higher than that for Republicans, is my guess.
Well, and John Thun talked about this at GRPC. I remember because I just finished editing his video a few days ago. And you have to very carefully watch the videos as you edit them. I may be the one person in the entire country that very carefully watches every bit of GRPC. But John Fund was saying that October 1st it goes from somewhere in July it goes from general public to registered voters. October 1st the polls start going from registered voters to likely voters. And the closer we get to election, the more accurate the polls get. We'll see. I still remember in 20 in what was it in 2016 when it was Trump versus Hillary. Hillary had a huge lead on election day, and we are going into election day, and everybody was just about in panic mode. And then coming out of election day, everybody was celebrating except for those on the left who were going into panic mode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. As far as polls, I like to see when we're ahead, and I like to you want to believe the polls when they're in your favor, and then you don't want to believe them when they're not in your favor. But I guess if we look at the polls, understanding that the media pretty much shifts everything a little bit, weighs everything a little heavy on the left. I think that's fair to assume that, a small percentage anyway. So I think we're looking pretty good. I hate to assume anything, like we're going to win. Like there's going to be this huge red wave. I hate to assume that because then people might not get out and vote like we should.
Well, and one last thing on the elections, and then we'll move on to our next story. We'll get a couple comments, move on to our next story. But in South Dakota, we haven't elected a Republican since the early 70s. I believe it was 1972 was the last time we elected a Republican governor. Uh-huh. And yet, Kristi Noem, who has done wonders for our state, Paul Lathrop speaking, has been a wonderful governor, is in a race. The polls are showing, that she's leading, and God bless Kristi, she's running like she's 20 points behind. And yeah, I think that's fantastic. She's right now working her tail off to get reelected, even though the polls show her with a bit of a lead in a strong red state.
Yeah, that's what we should do. We should always assume we're a little bit behind.
Let me get a couple comments in here. Larry over on the Facebook side, it's because going back to the lame duck and what I was discussing, my fear is because during the lame duck sessions, all the quacks control. And he also mentioned a book, How to Lie with Statistics by Daryl Huff, released in 1956.
That's interesting. I might have to check that out.
And then one more from the YouTube side, we've got Big John 410. The corporate media and the schools and Hollywood keeps propping them up, the polls. And you've even written a bit about this, Dan. Hollywood does have a lot of influence on public opinion. And we do have to fight that to get public opinion, at least on Second Amendment issues, centered back where it should be. And get the Hollywood, honestly, lies out of the picture.
Yeah. Well, the stuff they do with gun imagery and gun-related, things in movies is just, it's almost criminal, the way they misrepresent guns. Like I talked about, and you heard me talk about this, the movie True Lies with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes. And
how the gun is falling down the stairs and firing all on its own and spraying bullets and killing all the bad guys all on its own. There's nobody pulling the trigger because they need to show you that. They need to show you that guns act on their own, that guns are, guns can be deadly all by themselves, because we know it's not true, and we know we never see that in real life because it just doesn't happen. So in order to push that narrative of gun control and gun violence or gun violence and, assault weapons and all this stuff, they need to visually create that for you. And so they're scoundrels. They're terrible, the way they do that. So yeah, you're right. Hollywood has a big influence on how we think about guns in America.
I want to move on to we're down to 5 minutes left. We've only got one story. I want to get one more story in this today. This one coming off of Newsweek. President Joe Biden says he'll add a federal ban on assault weapons to his list of legitimate legislative accomplishments, despite the political headwinds facing gun control and the president's agenda. Biden made the comment in an interview to CNN's Jake Tapper on Tuesday evening as the president touted his legislative wins since taking office. These victories include a bipartisan bill that became the first gun safety package passed by Congress in nearly 2 decades. Without offering details, Biden said he would successfully seek national prohibitions on military-style rifles, a goal that's long eluded gun safety advocates. By the way, and this is a quote directly from Biden, by the way, I'm going to get an assault weapons ban before this is over. I'm going to get that again. Not a joke, and watch.
Not a joke. No, I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's got a chance. First of all, they tried that back in 1994 with the so-called assault weapons ban. It did nothing to stop violence like they promised it would. Democrats always promised to save people's lives and stop violence and protect people. It didn't work. It sunsetted 10 years later because it did nothing to stop violence. Now is probably the worst time that they could do that, in my opinion, because they just don't have the support for it in Congress. I don't see how he's ever going to get that done. And on top of that, if by chance he did get some sort of so-called assault weapons ban, I hate to even use the term, Paul. I don't know why. You see, we're forced to use that term because it's part of our vocabulary, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But anyway, even if they did get some sort of semi-automatic weapons ban to go through and become law, it would get fought in court and knocked down, all because of the Bruin case, which I think it would be knocked down based on the historical tradition portion of that decision by Judge Clarence Thomas. So I don't think they have a chance on that. I think this is all pandering to the fearful anti-gun leftists for their vote. That's all it is.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And this is also, now keep in mind, we are really gearing up politically for the midterms in November. I think he's honestly trying to shore up something that really doesn't exist, and that's there's a few people out there who are truly anti-gun. They show up in Moms Demand t-shirts whenever the NRA gets together. You don't see them many other places, but he's trying to shore those people up. What he's also doing is the people that go to NRA, the people that the NRA annual meetings, the people that go to Gun Rights Policy Conference, the people that go to events throughout the country, he's also solidifying their opposition to him. And I honestly believe, Dan, that there's a ton more of us that are motivated than there are the other side that are motivated.
Yeah, I think so, because we've been taking the beatings on the Second Amendment for long enough, and we're done. We're not taking it anymore. We're fighting back. Finally, seems like we're really fighting back. And even some of the previous non-gun owners have decided that they're becoming gun owners. I mean, the way the gun sales spiked in 2020 after the left-wing riots shows us that even people who would probably be non-gun or anti-gun because they're primarily Democrats or whatever, they're buying guns like crazy. So I don't think they have the support anymore. That's why you're going to see these almost violent attempts at gun control in these blue states like the Albany, New York legislature, California's legislature, California, and some of these really blue states. That's why they're so angry that they will do anything to go above and beyond to get their way. But ultimately, I think across the country, the majority of people, they're just not interested in gun control anymore, especially with all the crime. People want to be able to protect themselves. So I don't think they have the support.
And one story that we're not going to have time to get to, at least in depth, but I do want to mention the the numbers came back from the the people who put on SHOT Show.
Okay.
Anyway, the numbers came back. They do a monthly breakdown of NICS checks, and we are now at 38 months of 1 million plus gun purchases per month nationwide.
Yeah.
The Democrats are a gift that keep on giving. There aren't 38 million of us didn't go buy a second, a fifth, a 14th, an 83rd gun. In those million per month, there are, I'm going to guess, somewhere between 500,000 and 750,000 people that bought their very first gun.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many of those are first timers, but it doesn't matter. Gun sales and gun ownership is sought after now more than ever. So yeah, you're right. They are the gift that keeps on giving, because they keep creating this violence, and they create these horrible policies that people have to live under, and people have had enough.
Yeah, and we got to work on getting out of here. But gun websites on the YouTube side. Thank you. My brain is not working very well today. NSSF, yes, that's the people that put on the that's the people that put out the numbers that I was referring to, and put on SHOT Show every year. Anyway, Dan, we got to get out of here. We're already over time. On the way out the door, tell everybody about the Good Gun Bad Guy series of books and your Loaded Mic program, man.
Good Gun Bad Guy, here's the latest edition, Good Gun Bad Guy 3, Exposing Anti-Gun Politics. You can get this and the other two editions at goodgunbadguy.com, goodgunbadguy.com, and you can check out my web show, which is primarily a Second Amendment-related show. You can check that out at loadedmic.com. Loaded Mic, like microphone, M-I-C, loadedmic.com and goodgunbadguy.com. And thanks a lot, Paul. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. I want to remind everybody, as I get my calendar pulled up here, that we are live tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow, Matt Mallory. It's been about a month since Matt's been in the commentator chair. Another New York guy. Matt will be here tomorrow. Friday, we're talking with Tom Walls, going to the other coast, talking training on Friday. Tom wants to talk about sights and sight adjustments when we talk training on Friday. And then, of course, Saturday we have the weekly bullet at noon Central Time. Do keep tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. And we will see you next time.